Welcome back to Lit Discovery 2021. We are ready to commence our second panel discussion of today. And the topic of discussion, our green plans, and is this a sustainable career choice? I'm very happy to introduce our distinguished panel, and they are Dr. Susie Curtit, President, Singapore Institute of Building Limited, Mr. Eric Lim, Chief Sustainability Officer, United Overseas Bank, Ms. Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, Ms. Esther N, Chief Sustainability Officer, City Developments Limited, Mr. Frederick Teo, Managing Director, Sustainable Solutions, Temasek International. And this discussion will be moderated by Mr. Rob Khoo, Head, Marcoms and Sustainability, Sunsip Group, Managing Director, Solar PV Exchange. Over to you, Rob.
All right, thanks for having Sunsip on this panel. Just want to firstly thank all the distinguished guests here today. We've got a very unique guest, line of guests here. We've got from the government, Minister Grace Fu, and then we've also got from Temasek Holdings, Mr. Frederick Teo, and our lovely Ms. Esther An from CDL, and also from UOB Group, Mr. Eric Lim, and from the Singapore Institute of Building Limited, Dr. Susie Curtit here. So today, it's multifaceted. You'll be able to see how you can fit into different industries or different sectors of this sustainability. I won't waste too much time because time is limited. I will go straight into questions. Maybe I'll start with Mr. Grace. We hear that there was an announcement of the Singapore Green Plan 2030 recently, and there was 5 pillars. To the audience out there, do you think you could summarize for them what are these 5 pillars?
Sure. Thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity to summarize the Green Plan. I'll try to do that succinctly. Basically, if you think about it, how does a country move forward towards a low-carbon future? I know we all hear about the effects of global change and global warming and climate change. So we want to move to a future where we collectively emit less carbon dioxide, right? So we burn less fossil fuel, we use less materials so that we can conserve resources. But how do we do that? What can we do? What's the role of private sector? What's the role of the financiers? What's the role of individual? What's the role of communities, for example? So the Green Plan gets everyone together on the same page, paints the direction, and hopefully get everyone, all the stakeholders to move in the same direction so that Singapore really can be an important player in climate action. So it actually has 5 pillars. The first one is, I think, something that everybody is very familiar with. If you go walk around the street in Singapore, you look at the sun and say, wow, today is very hot, very humid. But once you get under the shade, you feel a lot different, right? The trees in Singapore particularly make us very different from another city that is very highly urbanized because we are very green. So we think that a city in nature is what will give us a much better handle on heat, on urban heat, but also allow us to really live in a much more enjoyable and livable city. So city in nature is one where we looked at how we can use the greenery, the landscaping, both as a way to make our life easier, more pleasant, but also more importantly as a carbon sink. Because as you know, plant actually will take up the CO2 from the atmosphere. So that includes how much green we should plant, where we should plant, and also how can we make all the greens link up together. So as you walk from your home to work, actually you'll be in a pleasant environment. So city in nature. Second one is about sustainable living. All right? Every one of us individually, we consume resources and we're responsible for our own CO2. So from taking the bus to taking a plane when we can, and from consuming air conditioning. Right? So earlier we heard about how the panel talked about built environment and so on. So really the entire society, the economy can actually move towards a living lifestyle that actually is a lot more sustainable. Lower carbon, less wastage, more recycling. The third one is really about energy. We want to move away from fossil. We have to think about how to substitute our fossil fuels with renewable energy. But in Singapore, as you know, we have very limited options. So we have to really collectively think about, creatively increasing our solar, our, other renewable options, including, for example, putting solar panels on our reservoir that we recently done, maybe even buying renewable energy from neighboring countries. I know Sunsip has a large, solar panel in Vietnam, I believe. So these are all possible options. Having a resetting our energy mix, using a lot more energy efficient equipment, air conditioning, the way that we built our buildings, using less energy per capita so that we collectively use less energy. So energy reset is the third pillar. The fourth one, which is really exciting, is really looking at sustainability as a new engine of growth for economy and creating many, many exciting jobs for our people, right? So whether you are in, accounting, legal, built environment, architect, maintenance, there's always now a sustainability angle. How can I do my work, run my company with less CO2, with less impact on the environment? So that's a shift in how we do things. So I think that's going to create new skill sets, going to require new skill sets, going to create new jobs, and also we hope that it's a whole new sector that we can create. That's number 4. The number 5 is actually about resilience. So climate action is not just about mitigating the impact of carbon. It's also about adapting. If you look at around the world, you see that we have many, many really extreme weather events just happen in China, in Germany, for example, floods that we have never seen before, right? Also, we are thinking that with global warming, there could be diseases because, in places that never had a problem with mosquitoes, now find that the temperature warm enough to have mosquitoes, and there's no immunity in that community about mosquitoes-borne diseases. So there's a whole new worry or concern or focus really on adaptation. So adaptation is not just about building more flood barriers. It is about that, but also about how can we live comfortably, sustainably in a world where there's actually global warming. How do we grow our food, for example, when there's actually more extreme weather pattern? So the last part about resource resilient is about how do we protect ourselves in terms of water, in terms of food, to be resilient against the future where it can be a bit warmer. So we'll do what we can to mitigate our impact, but at the same time, we're quite clear, we need to be prepared in case we're heading towards a much more warmer future. So these are the 5 pillars of Green Plan.
Well, thank you, Minister Grace. I guess picking up on your first point about buildings itself, I'm going to throw the question to the lady next to you. Buildings, that's something that CDL has always been associated with, premium buildings. How has your journey with sustainability been, and how did it start, and what were some of the challenges you faced? Yeah, Ms. Esther.
Okay, yeah, thank you for having me. And well, definitely real estate is very close to the heart of everyone because you live in one, you work in one, and you entertain, shop, eat, and in one. So how you, as the users of building, have a very high impact on the building environment as well. And just now we heard from the BCA colleague talk about how we can design, build, and also manage property in towards a low carbon future. And of course, we have quite a few partners here on the panel. Of course, Sunsip is one of our partners to adopt solar panels. And of course, when you talk about funding, I have a banker here who just be part of our 1.2 billion finance as well. So I think for building sector, we do have very high environmental impact. Globally, we are accounting for about 40% of greenhouse gas emission worldwide. So if we don't, design, build, and also manage our property with, decarbonization in mind, it will be, it will not be able to achieve a low carbon future. So for my own journey, I really enjoy every bit of it. Okay, don't ask me when did I start my journey. I started in 1995. Some of you probably just born or what. So when I first joined, I was like really new to the industry. And over these 2.5 decades, I have seen so many changes. How we construct, using technology, prefabricated, prefinished technology rather than the good old day, and then we also look at reporting, which is something very, very important. When I first started the journey, I actually published annual report, financial report, because I actually set up the comms department for CDL. And over the year, from the normal communications, corporate communication, we expanded to CSR, expanded to sustainability, and in 2014, I formalized to the dedicated sustainability department. So when I show the name card to people, then they just look at it. Seriously, what do you really do? What does the Chief Sustainability Officer do, But today, I'm sure, Eric, you don't have this problem already, right? So today, a lot of people, oh, my kid also wants to save the world. Can I join? Can you talk to him, So I think sustainability, if you open your newspaper or social media, if you don't see the word sustainability, I'll buy you coffee, okay? So the world has really changed a lot. And now, sustainability reporting, it was like from good to have to mandatory in 2017. And today, if you don't have it, you don't need to talk to investors anymore. So there are so many changes in our career. And I will share a little bit more that, on the way up, some of your young NTUC also say, what sort of, skill set? I said, we need every skill set. Not just about real estate, but we need people who are good with number, good with reporting, good with writing. You need to be very caring, curious about the environment. You need to be very committed. You need to be very creative. And you also need to be able to communicate. The 4C, which actually make up the attribute of a good sustainability professional.
Okay, thanks, Esther. When you speak on buildings, I also have another question for our lady guest here, Miss Dr. Susie Katit. Given that you are in the Singapore Institute of Building Limited, you must have come across many different professions, different companies. What do you notice about why some companies still hold back, if there is?
Yeah, I have been in the Singapore Institute of Building since starting from a student member. Then I ended up being an associate member. For the past 12 years, I've been actively involved in Singapore Institute of Building. Now, what are the challenges I see in the association is most of, in this built environment industry, most of us are male dominant. So you don't see a lady or a young girl in the built environment industry. So in any places that I go, I'm always the only girl, the only lady. So 12 years later, I'm the first lady president of Singapore Institute of Building Limited. And it's 40 years old now. Yes.
Congrats.
Right. So many people, when they join the trade association, they were saying that, okay, what actually is sustainability? What is sustainability? The word sustainability, everybody has a question mark there. So to us in the Singapore Institute of Building, we promote green sustainability for building materials. We educate the younger generation. We actually live the life of our members from not being in the green into the green. Ours, we have our members coming and say, wow, going into green, so expensive. Cost is the thing there, but never mind, we have the finance guy here now. So that's why. So now people have shifted from being, noticing that these are the challenges, they move into the industry because, yeah, they see the future in this industry. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Susie Katit. Now that she mentioned a bit of finance, naturally I'm going to throw the question to Mr. Eric Lim. Before this, I had a chat with you. You are double hatting. Yeah. Could you tell us the other role that you're wearing? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Rob. I actually hold two portfolios with the bank. The first one, and the main one, obviously, right now, is as Chief Sustainability Officer. The second one, which I've been holding for the last 8 years, and I continue to hold, is as the head of group finance. And Rob and I, we were chatting about what was the thought process as to why the bank decided to bring these two roles together. And I shared with him that I thought it was the beginning of a new trend, right? If you think about sustainability within a banking environment, traditionally there is the risk management side of managing ESG risk. And then there's the sustainable finance side where the bankers go out and print loans. But really, you're starting to see a corporate track that's coming up where these roles don't necessarily need to come from either risk or from the banker side. And these are corporate executive level roles that are responsible for overarchingly strategy, bringing the whole organization together in terms of capability build, and then ensuring that we deliver to the agenda of what needs to be done, both for the bank, for the clients, for the economy, as well as in line with national economies. So those are the two hats I carry. And I think while it is quite tough carrying both roles, it is also extremely exciting because you can see how the whole bank connects together and how you can push the whole bank forward, not only from a sustainable delivery perspective, but also from a performance management and finally taking care of our clients as well as shareholders and stakeholders.
All right, thanks, Eric. I'm going to jump to another question later, but before I do that, I'm just going to ask my final guest here, who's also into investment, but someone who's also invested in Sunsip as well, Mr. Frederick Teo. Could you tell us a bit about the Temasek journey?
Sure. I think when we talk about the Temasek journey on sustainability, I think we would say that we have probably got into sustainability a little bit longer than most because as a long-term investor, we have always got to think about the long-term sustainable returns of our companies. Many of our iconic companies that we own are not companies that we would trade in and out of. These are companies that we will hold for the long term, and therefore we need to think very carefully, how would they continue to perform well over a long run? That means that they have to be very conscious about being resource efficient in order to have a cost competitive advantage. We know that they need to be able to work well with the communities that they operate in so that they have a proper social license to operate. They will need to also continue to be able to adapt to changing disruptions, technology, advancements, and things like that, right? So sustainability, when we think about it, is really about long-term sustainable returns. But more recently, it is also important for us to think about the existential threats that is affecting our communities. Climate change is one of them, right? And so our companies, in terms of wanting to perform well in the long term, are not going to be immune from the impact of climate change and some of the other considerations that we have. And so I think about 10, 11 years ago, we started to put sustainability as one of the topics that we want to look at when we talk about investing. Now, we are investing in sustainability not just simply because it will be a financially sensible thing to do, because the commercial opportunities are there. But as a responsible investor, it is also important for us to think about where do we want to deploy our capital? How will we want to support the kind of change and new kinds of companies and technologies and solutions that we want to see for the world? So if we think about the fact that actually the digital camera, for example, was discovered by Kodak way before it actually became a very common consumer product. But because of the lack of investment at that point in time by Kodak not wanting to perhaps cannibalize its own traditional film business, it didn't get the time of day. But it is so important for us to be able to see what is going to be making a difference and making a positive impact for our society, for our communities, and then be able to also deploy capital to support the development of such technologies and solutions. So over time, I think we have come along this journey. We have also coined the term ecosperity to be able to reflect a certain philosophy in the way that we look at this, which is that we do not think that there is, for example, a choice or a false choice between doing well and doing good. Both must come together. Even as we want to be financially successful, commercially successful, we also need to pay attention to the kind of impact that we have on our natural and human ecology. So that is the kind of journey that we've been on, and I'm quite glad to say that I'm part of a team that is trying to think about how we can continue to push that agenda forward with our portfolio companies, with our own investments, and also with the larger ecosystem.
Thank you, Frederick. That's a very good summary for the first part. And I think from the discussion that we had just now, from the 5 pillars to CDL's journey to Dr. Susie Kettit's gender issues when she first joined the industry, and Mr. Eric Lim double-hatting, and why the UOB went on this route on appointing you as a CSO, and Mr. Frederick Teo on your strategic goals. I think this whole sustainable environment requires many hands to clap. And I think the next question that I'm going to ask is from the floor is to Minister Grace. What's your advice for tripartite partners and associations to work with the union to achieve the SG Green plans?
This is such a good question. I think it must be from a union leader, right? We think about what we can do on the tripartite partnership. But actually, if you think about it, I think many of my colleagues here have explained how it works in their companies. Really, it's incorporating sustainability as one of the key indicators. It's not just looking at financial and then have a few sets of, oh, good to have, you've done my CCA, you've done my community service. It's no longer like that. Investors and also bankers are increasingly fusing sustainability in their overall evaluation of companies. So if you look at a company and they say, oh, shall I invest in a company? They will say, okay, is this company going to be around for 20, 30 years? If a company has assets in a coastal area that is subject to sea level rise, will I hold this company for 20, 30 years? Will it still be around? What value will this property be when rising sea level is inundating it with flood 3-4 times a year, right? So these are the considerations that investors are taking, the bankers are taking, and therefore increasingly companies around are putting sustainability really in the heart of what they do. So when they're going to invest, they will say, okay, how does this be affected by sustainability consideration? When a company is going to invest in a new air conditioning system, how does this meet our sustainability goal, right? If we are going to buy a new company or we're going to set up a new warehouse, how can we build it so that it meets the sustainability goals? So increasingly, green plan, part of it or all of it is going to be part of the company's what we call ESG consideration. This will involve trade-off, obviously. Some of the cheapest air conditioning system may not be the most energy efficient. So upfront costs may be higher, but longer run lowers the energy bill, maybe it's worth it. So there are always trade-offs in all these considerations, right? If you want to buy that hotel that I talked about it, wow, cheap, no? Because no one else is considering, right? But maybe it's cheap for a while, but maybe expensive in the long run when you always have to repair after a flood, right? So these are all the trade-offs that I think companies will have to take. And they have to bring their partners, they have to bring their workers, their employees along this. For a company that wants to move towards sustainability, wants to change the way that you do business, for example, packaging. Packaging is one area that uses a lot of resources, as we all know, especially during this P2HA. Everybody is buying online, and every time you buy online, there's a lot of tearing plastics away, paper boxes, and so on, right? So we are consuming a lot. The world cannot sustain this way of consumption. If we just use a buy, use, and throw kind of mentality, the world will, all the trees, not enough for us. Right? So we really need to think about how to do recycling. And in this recycling process, obviously there will be change to the way that the company organizes itself. How do we pack better so that we use less resources? How do we improve our processes? How do we do supply chain so that it is less CO2, less energy, less fuel in there? All these will require rethinking, re-engineering, and also a lot of changes to the way that the employees are doing things. So instead of just looking at financial viability, which I think NTUC and all the unions have lots of experience in working with management and with investors and with government, now increasingly it's not just financial return, but it's also about sustainability.
Thank you. I guess when you talk about the sustainability of the item or the project itself, it's something that I heard from Esther talk about some time ago, about recycling your building materials. Yeah, so that's something that I took notice of, and I would like you, Esther, to share with us how the CDL maintain its so-called the sustainability goals when it comes to building materials. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, if I can just go back a little bit on the overall strategic thinking, that we have 3 deliverables that we set for us. The first one is decarbonization. Okay, I mean, as a building sector, you know, we have the high carbon impact. So decarbonization, that means building green, is very important. And then the second D is actually digitalization. That means innovation. Like just now, you know, we heard about like BIM, how do we design better, and how do we make use of AI, digital twin, to simulate, you know, how do we orientate the building, how do we reduce heat gain right from day one when you plan for the property. It's very different from the good old days. So the third D is, of course, disclosure and communication. Everything we do have an impact on the environment and on the people as well. So whether positive or negative impact, you have to account for it. We are very calculative people now, you know. Everything, every light we calculate, because we set target for like, you know, how many % of energy, you know, reduction we are, you know, setting for ourselves. And after so many years, only in February this year, we make the very bold commitment, that is to sign on to the World Green Building Council's Advancing Net Zero, carbon operational, you know, net zero by 2030 for buildings that are under our direct control. So that's why we have to be very calculative. How we accumulate, you know, how we use energy, how we, you know, add up to the carbon footprint, and how our value chain, even our tenants, we have achieved 100% tenant participation for our green lease since 2017. So at that time it was quite difficult, but today they are happy because they have to, many of our tenants have to report on their ESG performance. So, you know, having us as landlord, you know, so calculative, they are happy too because we all share the same pressure. And I also saw the questions about, is it more expensive? In fact, the cost of inaction will be higher than the cost of action because the business case has never been stronger. If you look at what BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, has to say, you will immediately change your mind because it's like you either, you know, show your climate strategy or ESG performance, or you will risk losing, you know, the opportunity for us to invest in you. And the latest is even some of them even outvote your directors. So there are a lot of costs of inaction and reputational risk if you don't do it. So don't look at short term that, wow, it's more expensive, you know. Look at long term. Yeah, then you will see the value and the long term, you know, benefits of designing, building, and managing your property with low carbon in mind. Yeah.
Thanks. I think the long-term view of your projects or your company is something that sometimes it's not so obvious at the beginning. And I guess for Dr. Susie Ketet, which you have lots of companies, what are some of the short-term wins for companies who are trying to achieve sustainability?
For short term?
Yeah.
Okay, it's mainly, I think, on the knowledge of how the calculation is being done on carbon emission, knowledge of how the world has been using this CO2 carbon emission in the building materials, how they calculate project emission, new projects, retrofitting projects, and the baseline for all this project emission calculation. I think it's more about knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Eric, I'm going to ask you one question. With regards to sustainability, you guys have done your sustainability report. Why should anyone believe in your sustainability report?
It's a great question. Of course, we're touching on the topic of greenwashing. And I think it's important to go back to kind of what Minister and Esther said, right? Is the time and conversation on sustainability is no longer little bits here and there. I think every well-run company, every capable board as well as management realizes that the structural shift has happened, right? Governments are moving in a direction that is sustainable. Now, it's a question of time and pace, but the direction is no longer in question. Asset managers, right? Both Minister and Esther raised up BlackRock, the money men and women have come into the game. And there is a brutal reality of the modern economy, which is where the money goes, action happens, right? And so essentially sustainability has gone both mainstream as well as commercial. And so if you're not following and pushing for and getting yourself future ready for this mega trend, whatever your business model is, over time is going to become irrelevant. And asset managers, bankers, financiers, we know this. So whenever we're doing a piece of business, we're not looking at whether a company is going to make a little bit more money in the next 12 to 24 months. We're looking at whether the company is transforming its business model to be around in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. Because there's this myth that folks have that, oh, you bank it while you can, and then you get out when it no longer becomes viable. That's not happening because everybody understands this concept of a stranded asset. And by the time you want to get out, nobody is coming in, right? So it's absolutely important that the whole system engages in this journey, and it's happening. So down to the sustainability report, it's a very simple answer, right? If you look at the holistic strategy of a company, be it CDL, be it one of our banks, you should be able to see all of the component parts moving as a whole company. If you're seeing a little bit of marketing speak, a little bit of CSR here and there, then absolutely, right? But you should be able to sense a good quality strategy and execution when you read through the SR.
Thank you, Eric. Sorry to throw you under the bus there. And for Frederick itself, how does Temasek gauge what companies to invest in?
Well, that's a very complex question, right? So there are many factors, obviously, in terms of looking at evaluating our investments, and we obviously look at the intrinsic value of a company and whether we believe in its long-term prospects, whether we believe in the strategy that it has. But maybe I will turn that question, I think, around to what you want to ask, which is that how do we evaluate the sustainability credentials of a company? How do we know that it is actually going to be there for the long run, right? So we have actually tried to place sustainability at the core of everything that we do. That basically means that if investments is our main function, then we got to think about how we invest right when it comes to being climate positive, being environmentally aligned, and being sustainability ready. So for some years now, we have actually mainstreamed our ESG investment management function, so that now in fact, all investments that we make actually have to go through some kind of an ESG filter in order to evaluate not just the risks, but also the ability for the company to actually be resilient and, if you like, a little bit future-proof, right? From a sustainability perspective. I think Eric is absolutely right. We are, not just as bankers, but even as investors, we are worried about stranded assets. If today you have had a large exposure to coal-fired power plants, I think you're going to be in trouble, right? Maybe but the question for us is not about evaluating what is today, but what will happen in 10, 20 years. So what will be the new coal? What will be the new stranded asset? Would it be red meat? Because of the environmental pressures of having super high meat consumption, will that be a problem? Should we continue to invest in that? So those are questions that we ask ourselves all the time. And I think having a good filter, both from a risk perspective, but also more importantly, having a strong view on what a sustainable future will look like, what are the kinds of products, services, business models that will be compatible with that sustainable future, will help guide us in terms of making the right investment decisions.
Thank you. Now that we've got an idea of how buildings manage their sustainability and how investment companies and banks view sustainability, maybe I would like to ask Minister Grace again. Given that you've got this green plans, how do you envisage the future of the workplace and the workforce with this sustainability drive and the green plans in place?
Thank you. Before I answer your question, Rob, I just want to, make a mistake about your company's investment. It's in Indonesia, isn't it?
We have in Vietnam, and also
the latest one, the largest one,
is the
floating.
one in Indonesia.
But it's even closer in Singapore than Vietnam. So important here. Let's do some of that. Yeah. So question about how would that change the workplace? Actually, we hope that everything will be changed.
Whoa.
Because I think the world really needs a fundamental relook on how we operate. As we speak, already we think that we are heading towards the 1.5 degree change in temperature. There's so many signs that climate change is happening. It's happening because it's man-made, it's made by us, present and the past. And that if we don't do something quite significant and to try to change the trajectory that we are heading, I think human beings, is really heading for extinction. Or we have to spend so much money on adaptation that it's just going to suck the resources out of other productive use. So as Esther said, inaction actually is going to cost a lot more than action. I think countries know that, and we see that more and more countries are setting an ambitious goal to turn carbon neutral by 2050. And that's going to set the tone from governments, not just in Singapore, the governments in Europe, in US, in Asia, Japan, Korea, China, for example, have already set some deadlines, and they want to make that change. And once countries are setting that as a target, I think the private sectors will also look at the target very seriously, both in terms of trying to meet it so that they will not be called out, and also from hunting for new opportunities. Because if a country as big as China, as Japan and Korea all add up together, just imagine what will be the market for electric vehicle, for example, right? It's going to totally change automobiles. So these countries are not just doing it for climate change, they're actually going for the business. They have gone for the business in solar, they have gone for the business in wind, and they're going to go for a lot more opportunities that's going to come because countries, companies, governments are looking for sustainable solution. One of our participants is asking about droplet-based electricity generator. So you see, ideas like that are coming up from the ground, from organically, from investors, from research institutions, from scientists to look for solutions for sustainable development. And that's going to change quite drastically. So in Singapore, we are really hoping that our companies, large and small, will embrace sustainability, both as a way of organizing yourself, doing your business, and trying to, in a way, move towards a more sustainable business models, and also looking at it for new opportunities in this area. So the government is going to come in with quite a bit of a grant program to support all companies, including SMEs, to start building up capability in sustainability. And I think this is where many of our NTUC friends can play a role. Because you are there, you are doing the business, you are doing the operations, just like how we've been looking at ways to make ourselves more efficient, more cost-effective. Look at how we can be better on the sustainability front. How can we save energy? How can we make our resources run a longer mile, make more out of it, use less resources, reduce wastage, recycling. And actually, it is, as we all know, actually the person on the floor, so to speak, will be the one to have the eye to spot where the inefficiency are, where are the ways that we can recycle and we can save more. So actually, everyone from investors to CEOs, all the way, everyone in the organization can play that role in making the company a lot more greener and friendlier to the environment.
Thank you, Minister Grace. So we've come towards the end of the panel discussion. One last question that I probably want to ask everyone on this panel is, if I want to join your company, especially in the sustainability department, what is the one thing that I need to have or say to get an interview with you? Maybe we start with Dr. Susie Katit first.
I'm willing to learn. I want to be a farmer because I work for a company who is doing turnkey solution for farm construction. Now I'm wearing a hat of not the president of SIBL, but a regional director for a turnkey solution farm construction company. So if you are interested, like me, you can be a farm construction.
Thank you. Mr. Eric?
I agree with the doctor, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to have the willingness to hustle, to take on multiple portfolios, sweat it, because if you go in on day one expecting success, no one's going to hand it to you. So you got to sweat for it, yeah.
I would think that someone that's willing to be comfortable in a changing environment, because this is an area where we are expecting change, and we hope that you will be championing the change.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been interviewing. You don't know how many people I have been interviewing, you know. And I think I always say that I look for passion, true passion. You know, if there's someone just come in and say, I'm very passionate about the environment, I don't even know what is Paris Agreement, don't even know what is net zero, then of course those are not. But I think apart from passion, you also need knowledge. You also really need to understand that, don't just like, this company is very famous of, sustainability. Go to their website, look at their nature of the scope of the business, whether this is really what you want as a career. Talk to the people, get mentor. Mentorship is very important. Yeah, because you are listening to people who have walked the journey. I think with better understanding, then you can really, with your open eyes, and go into a company, rather than after 2 months, 3 months, that, sorry, it's not my cup of tea, then I will leave, No employer like job hopper. So, I've been interviewing a lot of people, mentoring a lot. So look at really what you really want and show that you have the knowledge and true passion, and loyalty counts. You see, I've been with the company for 26 years.
Thank you, Esther. And last but not least?
Yeah, right. Maybe I'll address the question slightly differently. In a way, I hope that will be helpful to our audience as well. I totally agree about the need to have passion for any job that you do. Actually, that's a lifelong thing, and it's actually ageless. It will always be true. But when it comes to sustainability jobs, I think it is important to realize that actually any job can be a green job. It is not just a sustainability tag. Whether you are a HR professional looking at gender diversity, inclusion, whether you are a finance professional looking at being able to account for carbon emissions in your company, whether you're a legal professional looking at compliance to ESG metrics, you're an investor looking at sustainability investments, or anything, there is always a sustainability component to every single job that we do. So the first thing that we remember is, if you're asking yourself, did the subject that I study in university or in college or in school matter? Actually, it can matter. Every job can be a green job. The second thing that is actually to be open-minded about what it means to then have a green job. Because earlier on, Jakob was talking a little bit about the waste industry. Today, the waste industry is also employing chemical engineers, employing data analysts to be able to screen for the kinds of waste that they have, and then deciding, do I do chemical recycling, mechanical recycling? What can I actually do with it? Today, when we talk about farming, is farming just carrying a hoe, going out to the ground, digging it up, and then planting seeds on the ground? No. We are talking about indoor farms, high-tech farming. So you are as much likely to find a data scientist in a farm than an agriculture expert. So the way that the economy is actually shaping up is going to be very different. So one of the studies that came out, I think by the WEF report in 2016, suggested that actually a majority of the kids that were going into first grade or in primary school are likely to do a job when they graduate that did not exist when they actually started school. So the idea here really is about being open-minded about what those jobs are, being willing to continually learn, but more importantly, realizing that sustainability jobs exist. They exist in all sectors, they can exist in all fields, and that it's a matter of us embracing that sustainability mindset in everything that we do.
Thank you, Frederick. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you to all my guests and to Mr. Grace Fu, to Esther, to Mr. Eric Lim, to Dr. Susie Kitsit, and of course, last but not least, Frederick Teo, Mr. Frederick Teo. So to all of you who are watching this, stay hungry, stay humble, and be open and be passionate. You have a career in sustainability in the future. Thank you.
So thank you, panelists, for your time. And back to you, our virtual audience. We have come to the end of the panel discussions for today. And if you're feeling excited about exploring career opportunities in green and sustainability, I'd like to invite you to head over to the networking section, where you can now meet career mentors and employers with the relevant experience, as well as explore job vacancies. For NTUC Union members, the masterclass on the true meaning of being agile has just started. We invite you to head over to the activity space on the platform, and at 9:30 p.m., join us on Young NTUC's Clubhouse, where we'll discuss a topic close to our hearts. Will we ever run out of food in Singapore? We hope to see you tomorrow as we go into an area more personal with a softer touch on the final day of Lit Discovery. The topic, mental well-being in the workspace. Meanwhile, happy discovering.